Assalamu alaikum. Army Public School and College Khanewal. It's class second year biology lecture. Chapter number 19, and the topic we are going to discuss about is the learning behavior. Yes, learning behavior. We have seen the innate behavior and the inborn behavior, and that behaviors come naturally or by default, right? The innate behavior. But when we talk about this learning behavior, learning, which says that learning is change in behavior resulting from experience. Simply, so what is learning? Learning is change in behavior that anybody can notice a change in the behavior. You are bringing certain changes in your behavior, but how? From the experience. This is called the learning. It can easily be modified, right? Yes. Obviously, in these pictures in class, you can see here is a baby boy sitting with the mother. Whatever he is doing is done by the instruction of his mother, right? So it's mean that whatever he is learning here, it is change in the behavior. And how he is learning it? From the experience. What his mother is telling, he is following that all. It is change in behavior from experience. So this is called the learning. Here is another example for learning. You can see this snail here, right? And what snail do? Whenever you make some sound around this snail, what he do that he always cover himself under his shell, right? He just roll his body under this shell because whenever he hear the sound in his surrounding, he he does this activity of hiding himself in this cover, in this shell. So it's mean it is also learned behavior. But what happened when he hears the sound again and again, but he feels that this sound doesn't damage itself? So what he does, that he learned that he learns if he remains outside, he remains outside of his shell, it doesn't harm him. So this is the change in behavior, that he will listen the sound, but he will not cover himself, right? Why? Because he has experienced, and he is showing this change that he is not hiding himself in this cover. Reason being because he has experienced that what he experienced, that nothing damages him with this sound. So sound is not harmful for him. That's why now after even listening the sound, he remains out of his shell. So this is called the learning. And how he learned it? He learned it from the experience of this sound. Is it clear that what is learning?
Yes, miss.
If you notice that this learning has the direct involvement of the brain, right? Whenever you learn something, yes, you are also learning this lecture. Some of you are learning it quickly, some of you are not getting it as you should learn. So what it depends upon, it also depends upon your consciousness about that, how much active you are sitting, and you are utilizing your brain, right? So it is having a direct involvement of the brain, the learning. Okay, next here you can see another diagram. In this diagram, you can see that this object is touching the shell of snake. Now, whenever this stimuli, whenever the snail feel this stimuli, he cover himself under the shell. But what happened when he feel that it doesn't cause damage to itself? Then he has experienced about it now. After touching this stimuli, he is not hiding himself. This is also learning, right? Okay, in your environment, can you tell me an example of your environment where you noticed this learning? Yes, please. Can I give you one example of you students? मैं डेली बोलती हूँ कि आपको लेक्चर प्रिपेयर करके आना है, राइट? ऐसे होता है ना। और मैं कहती हूँ कि अगर आपने लेक्चर प्रिपेयर नहीं किया तो नेक्स्ट डे मैं आपको मारूंगी या आपकी पिटाई होगी, ठीक है। बट व्हाट हैपेंड ऑन द नेक्स्ट डे, जब आप मुझे लेक्चर नहीं सुनाते हो तो मैं आप लोगों को मारती नहीं हूँ, ठीक है। तो फिर आप लोग क्या कहते हो कि बस ये तो धमकी थी, मारनी पड़ी, ठीक है। तो इट्स मीन अगर मैं लेक्चर नहीं भी प्रिपेयर करता तो इट्स ओके। सो व्हाट आर यू लर्निंग कि वो मुझे तो कोई कुछ नहीं कहेगा, मेरी कोई पिटाई नहीं होने वाली, ठीक है। तो इसका मतलब है कि मैं लेक्चर ना प्रिपेयर करूं। यू आर ऑल्सो लर्निंग। एक्सेप्ट दिस, अगर आपने कभी नोटिस किया हो, जब हम बाहर सड़क पे आते हैं, ठीक है, यू कैन नोटिस कि वहां पर बहुत सारे व्हीकल्स होते हैं, बिटवीन देम हमारे पास बहुत सारे कार्स भी वहां पर होते हैं, ठीक है, जहां पर आप एनिमल्स को नोटिस कर सकते हो। पहले तो वो क्या करते हैं कि हॉर्न्स वगैरह से डरते हैं, ठीक है, बट व्हेन दे एक्सपीरियंस्ड कि हॉर्न्स वगैरह उन्हें कुछ नहीं कहते, ठीक है, इसका शोर उन्हें कुछ नहीं कहता, तो इवन यू हॉर्न देयर, ठीक है, आप उन्हें डराने की भी कोशिश करते हो, आप उन्हें साइड भी करने की कोशिश करते हो, पर उस साउंड का उनके ऊपर कोई असर नहीं होता। व्हाट इज दिस? दिस इज आल्सो देयर चेंज इन बिहेवियर। दे हैव एक्सपीरियंस्ड कि ये साउंड उन्हें कुछ नहीं कह रहा, राइट। दैट इज व्हाई वो इसको इग्नोर करते हैं, ठीक है। सो दिस इज कॉल्ड द learning. Are you clear with learning?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. See here the next. This is learning, and this was the habituation, right? That I explained you here. Learns to ignore. First, I told you about the learning. Then I explained the first type of learning, that is the habituation. And in habituation, you have noticed about this snail and other examples that I shared with you students, that you learn to ignore. It becomes your habit. And irrelevant stimuli. No stimuli is working there. This is called the habituation. Next it is the imprinting. Imprinting का मतलब क्या होता है? Yes, imprinting का क्या मतलब होता है? Prints. Imprinting comes from the word prints, right? What happens in imprinting? What kind of learning it is? Imprinting is form of learning in which an animal's form an association with an other animal or both in environment is called the imprinting. Here you can see that this is a duck and these are the baby ducklets and they are moving just behind the mother. Why? Because right after the hatching from the eggs, right after hatching from the eggs, what they observed, the first thing, they observed, they imprint their mother here, right? जैसे उन्होंने अपने एग से निकले, ठीक है, और उन्होंने अपने सराउंडिंग में जो पहली चीज नोटिस की, व्हाट वाज दैट? दे ऑब्जर्व देयर मदर कि वो इस तरह से वॉक कर रहे हैं एंड यू कैन सी दैट ऑल आर वॉकिंग इन सेम पैटर्न, ठीक है, सब ऐसे वॉक कर रहे हैं। तो यंग एनिमल्स फिक्सेस अटेंशन, first object having visual. Now they have fixed their attention with this first object in visual. Whatever they watch first after hatching from the egg, they fix it in their minds and they just follow that. Auditory tactile experience studied in birds, chicken, ducks, and geese. These are the other examples for this. And many other young mammals, species, and insects also show this imprinting behavior. So it's mean what we can say that what is critical period? The critical period is that after hatching from the eggs, the first activity to do, like this time period when they observed the first visual object, this time period is called the critical period in which they fix their attention for that object, right? For this purpose, to improve this imprinting, one scientist here, right, Corner Lawrence, what he did, you can see him that after hatching, imprint objects moving away from them. Incubator hatched gosling. Now what he did, he just hatched these animals in incubators, right? Instead of natural hatching, as you have seen here, that right after the hatching, they saw the mother first and followed it. But now what he did, he experienced himself with that after the incubators hatched goslings. You can see here these grill egg geese, right? जैसे ये एग से हैच हुए हैं, ठीक है, उसने इंक्यूबेटर में इनको हैच किया था, स्पेंड फर्स्ट फ्यू आवर्स विद लॉरेंस। उन्होंने सबसे पहले अपनी मदर को नहीं देखा, किसको देखा? लॉरेंस को देखा, ठीक है। अब क्या होता है कि यू कैन सी दैट व्हाट दे आर डूइंग, गोजलिंग इम्प्रिंटेड लॉरेंस। अब उनके दिमाग में जो फर्स्ट ऑब्जेक्ट विजुअल हुआ है वो कौन हुआ है? उनकी मदर नहीं थी, ठीक है, he was there, Lawrence was there. So what they are doing, they're just following this Lawrence, right? So it showed that no recognition for biological mothers. They are not recognizing that who was their biological mother. What they recognize, they just recognize that Lawrence as their mother and they are following him, right? So it's mean what it is. The first visual object was this Lawrence that they saw and they fixed imprints for him that whatever he is doing, they are following him. So this is called the imprinting and Lawrence proved this. Are you clear with this term, the imprinting?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes is only from one side. Rest of you are sleeping.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's mean you are sleeping. So you can say that, students, imprinting is a type of learning in which a very young animal fixes its attention on the first object, right? With which it has visual, तो उसको देखा भी है, auditory or tactile experience, and thereafter follows that object is called the imprinting. So after imprinting, what is the next type of learning behavior here? We can discuss about classical conditioning. Yes, learning. What is learning? Change in the behavior which says that it is learning. Or now we will see the classical conditioning. What happened in the classical conditioning? How can we define the classical conditioning? When an animal learns the same response for two different stimuli, right? Animal is responding same for two same stimuli, two different stimuli which are given to the animal simultaneously at a time. Means if at a time we are giving two different stimuli and the animal is responding for that, it is called the classical conditioning. Like we are giving condition to the animals. एक चीज पे तो उसने रिस्पॉन्स करना है, लेकिन हम उसके साथ उसको एक और स्टिमुलाई भी दे रहे हैं एट अ टाइम। हम उसको दो स्टिमुलाई दे रहे हैं डिफरेंट तरह के, ठीक है। उसके ऊपर वो जो रिस्पॉन्स शो करता है, दैट इज कॉल्ड द क्लासिकल कंडीशनिंग. For defining classical conditioning, I would like to share one example of this dog here. Here you can notice class. This was observed by a Russian scientist named Ivan Pavlov, and he worked on the dog salivation. You can see that उसने क्या किया कि उसने dog को hook से tie करके, ठीक है, उस पे कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट किए that we are going to see about his salivation कि वो saliva produce करता है या नहीं करता, ठीक है. Okay, now here you can see that food before conditioning. Condition apply करने से पहले आपको पता होना चाहिए, you are well known about it. Whenever this dog see this food, it is a stimulus for this dog, right? And whenever dog see the food, वो क्या करता है, वो response में salivation produce करता है, ठीक है. You can see that saliva is producing here. But अगर यही का हम उसको एक और चेंज कर दें उसका, ठीक है, अगर हम उसका स्टिमुलस चेंज कर दें, इंस्टेड ऑफ दिस फूड अगर हम उसको एक बेल जो है, ठीक है ना, बेल को रिंग करें, तो यू कैन सी दैट this dog is not producing saliva. ठीक है, अब ये कोई saliva produce नहीं कर रहा, so no salivation is here. Okay, now what we do that when we say that classical conditioning, at a time we are giving two different stimuli and the dog is responding here. The salivation process is here, you can see. Now what happened that at a time हमने simultaneously उसको bell को भी ring किया plus उसके सामने food को भी display किया. ठीक है, now you can see that dog is saliving, right? You can see the salivation here. तो इसका मतलब क्या है? अब उसको पता चलेगा कि एक तो इस साउंड से साउंड की जो ये जो साउंड है ये प्रोड्यूस हो, तो इसके साथ क्या मिलता है? फूड मिलता है. तो वो क्या कहता है? वो रिस्पॉन्स करता है. ठीक है, लेकिन अब हमने उसके साथ ये एक्टिविटी अगेन एंड अगेन रिपीट की है. नाउ ही हैज एक्सपीरियंस्ड इट कि अगर जब भी ये बेल रिंग करेगी और उसके साथ क्या उसको मिलेगा? फूड मिलेगा. ठीक है, तो अब यहाँ you can see here what we did after conditioning. We just removed this food and simple we are ringing the bell after a long time, after some time. Now what you can see, salivation is also here. It's mean he has learned about it that whenever this bell rings, it brings food for him. Now we are just ringing the bell, but he is salivation. Why? Because he knows that with this he can have that food also. So this is called the classical conditioning. इसकी समझ आई सबको?
Yes, miss. Yes, ma'am.
So you can see here the unconditioned response where there was no condition, right? And we applied some condition here during condition, and you can see that response. And without conditions, stimulus condition again given here, but he is also responsive. So you have seen the conditioned and unconditioned response of this dog. That is called the classical conditioning. Next it is the instrumental conditioning, or you can simply say that it is trial and error learning or operant conditioning for conditioned reflex type. Okay, and simply we can say it also the instrumental conditioning, trial and error learning or operant learning. What we do for this purpose, we just enclosed one rat in this cage, right? You can see here the cage. That is a well modified cage. And if you see the part of this cage, you can see here the speaker, the signal lights, the lever here, and pellet dispenser tube here. You can see that simply this is the food box outside of it. This is a pellet dispenser that gives pellet from this way. होता ये इसमें कि we leave one rat in this cage, ठीक है, इसमें sound भी produce हो रहा है. Now what he do here? This was done by B.F. Skinner. तो हम ये कहते हैं कि Skinner box जिसको बोलते हैं, ठीक है, because Skinner designed this box. And when an animal learn a response to a particular stimulus after many unsuccessful tries, अब होता ये है कि ये rat इसके अंदर पैक कर दिया, ठीक है, और उसके बाद वो अब क्या करता है, इसको ऑब्जर्व कर रहा है, इनसाइड जितने भी इसके फंक्शंस उसको ऑब्जर्व करता है. बट व्हेन ही फील्स हंग्री, तो वो क्या करता है, वो इधर उधर जगह जगह देखता है कि उसको फूड कहाँ से मिल सकता है. बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली उसका हाथ कहाँ लगता है? इस लीवर के ऊपर लगता है, ठीक है. और जब वो लीवर को टच करता है तो क्या होता है कि पैलेट डिस्पेंसर से क्या आता है? फूड मिलता है उसको, ठीक है. वो उसको यहाँ पर क्या मिल रहा है? फूड मिल रहा है. तो उसने इस फूड को उसने अब ये क्या किया है, उसने पहले कभी यहाँ पर टच किया, कभी किसी और चीज को देखा, कभी उसने बाहर निकलने की कोशिश की, बट नथिंग वर्क. बट व्हेन ही पुश्ड ऑन दिस लीवर, तो उसको पता चला कि इसको यहाँ से क्या मिलता है? फूड मिलता है, राइट. इसने क्या किया? ट्रायल एंड एरर लर्निंग और ऑपरेंट लर्निंग, ठीक है। तो इस तरह से इसने सीखा, ट्रायल एंड एरर्स के बाद, कोशिश करने के बाद उसने ये सीखा। दिस इज कॉल्ड द इंस्ट्रूमेंटल कंडीशन।
ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਕਦੋਂ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਟਿਪ ਟੌਪ ਖੇਲਦੀ ਕੌਣ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੁਪਰ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪੜਦਾ।
After this, there is another type of learning that is called the latent learning. Yes, what is latent learning? When an animal learns a response for a particular stimulus in routine life without having any punishment or reward. Like latent learning is learned without punishment or reward. What means on in daily base in your life on regular basis or daily basis, you can say also, you are observing some stimuli, right? For this purpose, I would like to give you one example here, class. That this rat in maze, it was presented by K.L. Lashley. He was an American psychologist. उसने इस maze को use किया था, ठीक है। वो कहते हैं when an animal learns a response for a particular stimulus in its routine life without having any punishment or reward, but sometimes when the animal is particularly exposed to that stimulus, the animal suddenly respond it by quickly recalling the previous experience. क्या मतलब है इसका? इसकी क्या एग्जांपल है? फर्स्ट करें कि हमने ये एक मेज ले लिया, ठीक है, हम इसके अंदर इस रैट को छोड़ देते हैं, ठीक है। द रैट मूव्स हियर, वो यहाँ पर जाता है, यहाँ जाता है, अंदर जाता है, ठीक है। यहाँ पर फूड पड़ा, ठीक है, ही इज नॉट ईटिंग दैट बिकॉज ही इज नॉट हंग्री हियर। तो वो यहाँ जाता है और उसके बाद उसको ये रास्ता याद हो जाता है, फिर वो वहां से वापस भी आ जाता है अगर हम उसको मेज के अंदर छोड़ दें, ठीक है। तो अब जब क्या होगा, इसको भूख लगेगी, he remembered that stimulus कि हाँ इस रास्ते से जाऊंगा, वहां पर क्या था, वहां पर फूड था। तो ये वो क्या करता है, वो रिकॉल करता है अपना प्रीवियस एक्सपीरियंस। इसको जब पहले यहाँ पर इस मेज में हमने इसको भेजा था, ठीक है, तो इसने अपने रास्ते को ऑब्जर्व किया, राइट, he just noticed this part. After that, when he feel hungry, he recalled the experience. Yes, there is the food. If I go there, I can have that food, right? Now he is moving towards there. It's mean this is called the latent learning. The learn without punishment or reward. इसके लिए इसको कोई punishment और reward नहीं मिल रहा. Simply उसने recall किया अपने experience को, तो उसको क्या, उसको food मिल गया. So this is called the latent learning. How can we define it? An animal learn a response for a particular stimulus, ठीक है, in his routine life without having any punishment or reward. But sometimes when animal is particularly exposed to that stimulus, the animal suddenly responded quickly, recalling the previous experience. अब देखो हमने उसको stimulus को भूख लगी, उसको पता है अभी food वहां पे पड़ा है, तो वो जाके वहां से उसे क्या कर लेगा, pick कर लेगा. So this is called the latent learning. If this is clear, can I move ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
यहाँ पे है हमारे पास इनसाइट लर्निंग। ये काफी कॉम्प्लेक्स टाइप की लर्निंग है, ठीक है, because it requires that an animal must respond correctly in first attempt to a particular situation it has never met before, ठीक है। कोई ऐसी आपको आपके सामने एक ऐसा समझिए कोई टास्क टाइप आ जाता है, ठीक है, कि जिसको आपने फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट में उसको क्या करना है, उसको आपने ओके करना। तो यहाँ आप देख सकते हैं, कोहलर वाज अ जर्मन साइकोलॉजिस्ट, ठीक है, उसने इनसाइट लर्निंग को इंट्रोड्यूस करवाया था। हाउ, उसने क्या किया था, उसने एक्सपेरिमेंट किया था किसके ऊपर, चिंपैंजीज के ऊपर एक्सपेरिमेंट किया था। तो कोहलर श्योर दैट एनिमल्स मस्ट परसीव रिलेशनशिप एंड मैनिपुलेट कॉन्सेप्ट्स इन इट्स माइंड। यस, वो क्या करते हैं, चीजों को ऑब्जर्व करते हैं कि हम कैसे इन चीजों को लिंक करके क्या कर सकते हैं, इसको इस जो भी कोई प्रॉब्लम है, जैसे मैथ्स का क्वेश्चन होता है आपके लिए, ठीक है, सिंपली आपको पता है, आप पहले क्वेश्चन की स्टेटमेंट को ऑब्जर्व करते हैं, फिर उसके बाद ऑब्जर्व करने के बाद आप सोचते हैं कि इसके अंदर पर्टिकुलर जो फॉर्मूला ये अप्लाई करेंगे, ये इसको सूट बैठता है, ठीक है, इसके अकॉर्डिंगली हम इसका आंसर इजीली अचीव कर सकते हैं। तो आप क्या करते हो, आप उसको उसी फॉर्मूला को अप्लाई करते हो उस मैथ्स के प्रॉब्लम के लिए, राइट। तो इस तरह से आप उसको क्या कर लेते हो, आपके पास उसका सोल्यूशन आ जाता है। दैट इज इनसाइड लर्निंग, राइट। Here you can see this chimpanzee's picture. What he is, he can see here the hanging bananas, and he is also very hungry. And what he noticed in the environment, these boxes. He is just trying to he's just trying to obtain these bananas, the hanging bananas. Now he will think, how can I get them? So you can see उसने क्या किया है, इन boxes को arrange किया है, ठीक है। पहले उसने ट्राई किया कि मैं इसको जंप करके पकड़ लूं, बट ही कुडंट। देन ही नोटिस द सराउंडिंग, उसने अरेंज किया चीजों को, और अरेंज करने के बाद यू कैन सी सिंपली वो बनाना तक पहुंच गया, और उसने नाउ ही इज नो मोर हंग्री। So what did this is? This is this learning is, you can define it, it's a complex type of learning because it requires that an animal must respond correctly in first attempt to a particular situation it has never met before. देखो उसने पहले इसको एक्सपीरियंस नहीं किया था, लेकिन उसने अपने माइंड में सोचा और उसने इसको फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट में ही उसको क्या कर लिया, अचीव कर लिया। दिस इज कॉल्ड द इनसाइट लर्निंग। एनी कंफ्यूजन हियर?
No, miss.
So here we are ending with our all types of learning.